In this next session, we're going to be talking about small and mid-sized galleries, ask the question, what next for them? Now, often, particularly at the smaller end of the market, when we talk about this subject, often it's spoken about sort of almost in terms of a crisis. People say traffic to galleries is declining, the fares are eye-wateringly expensive, the rents are going up, and that it's really, really tough out there for small and mid-sized galleries to operate. Guillaume Sultana, you run a small gallery in Paris. Is it really as bad as everyone says?
Sorry?
Is it really as tough out there as everyone says to run a small gallery?
Yeah, it is, of course, for all the reasons that you said, but it's also very exciting.
I mean, what specifically are the biggest challenges that are facing you as a gallerist?
There are a lot. I mean, of course, the financial issues are the most important. And to be able to be part of fairs, to be able to keep artists growing with us, to be able to, of course, have a space like interesting enough and a curatorial approach, of course, interesting enough to maintain like a program. Yeah, like all of that.
Your gallery is now about 6 or 7 years old, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of your colleagues, I'm sure, people that you know have tried to do it and have failed. Their galleries are no longer around.
Sorry, I can't hear.
I'm sure that a lot of your colleagues, people you know and work with in Paris, they've opened galleries and they're no longer around.
Yeah. We had few galleries that closed recently in Paris. Yeah, but also some of the one came in Paris, like some international galleries came recently in Paris and chose Paris to open a place in Europe and not necessarily in London or Brussels. So yeah, it's like a balance, of course, like everywhere else in the world. Some galleries closed for many reasons, but I think it's not easy to know why exactly and how many they close compared to how many they open. This would be interesting to know if there are more galleries that open or more galleries that close.
Almine, your gallery is of a different sort of size than Guillaume's. It's been around for a lot longer. You have 4 galleries in London, Paris, Brussels, and New York, and they're in fairly prestigious addresses, and you do all of the big art fairs. But if you were to put yourself in the shoes of someone who was starting out now, would you do it?
Well, I think so. I think I would do it because I like it now, so I would do it again. I mean, in a second life. But what I think is that even though what you say is true, it's very difficult, I think there is always room. Like, if you compare, which maybe makes it easier to figure out, you compare with music. You have majors, like, I don't know, Universal Music or whatever. But you have new labels all the time. And some of those new labels, they do succeed. And it's an even much more competitive world, the music artists. And they have a big difference, I believe, is that when you grow, they have started usually with some contracts, which are what they are, because when you start, you maybe don't have the top lawyers, but you have a contract. And the art world is totally another thing. You have basically no contract. And if you have, it's very difficult to find penalties for one or the other party. And that makes it a big struggle in art, because you can always try get the artist of another.
But it is very difficult to make that first step and get something. I mean, we're saying that some galleries go out of business, sure, that, you know, that's just part of the natural cycle of things, but to actually get grounded is extremely difficult. And Maike, you run Gallery Weekend here in Berlin. What are you doing to help those sort of start-up galleries at the first stages of showing and exhibiting works? What are you doing to give them a leg up and get them up and running?
Well, of course, at Gallery Weekend, we try to do the best work possible for them, to get collectors to them, to do a lot of PR for them. So this year at Gallery Weekend, we have 4 new galleries participating who are very young. And of course, we we support them a lot. So Gallery Weekend is also not unlike an art fair company. It's a non-profit company, so participation fees are relatively low, which also supports them, helps them to get a good step inside. I also run an art fair in September, which is also fairly cheap for the galleries to participate. And in general, I think there has been a shift in the environment for galleries in the past 10 years, which made it harder and harder for them. And this has a lot to do also with the expectations that everybody has to galleries, which was very much different 10 or 20 years ago. Also from the artists, who are much more aware of their market, from the museums, who expect the galleries to produce the works, to produce and pay for the shows, also from the collectors and from the fairs. So we try to lower this a little bit also by not pushing it too hard, but by not turning the wheel too fast. Once you're in Gallery Weekend, you're never pushed or kicked out again. So once you're in this group, we trust the galleries to do the best show possible, and they don't get kicked out. It's kind of a long-term group you're part of.
I think it's actually really quite impressive, really, how rather than just sort of complaining about the situation, that galleries are actually getting together, forming and grounding things that that can help them. I mean, so you know, the Gallery Weekend, the members of the galleries that show in it, they're the bosses of the organisation, aren't they? So they've come together to do something about it. Guillaume, what are you doing in Paris with other galleries to get together and find some strength in numbers?
Well, we did 4 years ago this art fair, Paris Internationale, with 4 other galleries. We funded this fair, and I think that's a good timing to do something all together, to try to bring a new generation of galleries like visible. And I think after the third and the next edition, which will be the 4th edition, it was kind of very important, actually, to do that. In other cities, there is like Condo, like you say, we try to organize ourselves to have an alternative way to work together, to collaborate together, and yeah.
Almine, as a larger gallerist, how do you view this concept of the smaller galleries getting together? Is it something that you feel a responsibility that you should support, or do you think that it's up to them to sort that out for themselves?
Well, I think they have to do their own thing. Also, it's another generation of galleries, so we don't know what the future is. So probably they are right to do what they do. It's not what we did 20 years ago, but because everyone was much more individualistic, although in Paris, like at a certain point, there was an opportunity to be in an area that was like cheaper, but that was long ago. It was in '97, and so many galleries that were in Le Marais, where rents were rising a lot, and some were finished. I mean, they had finished their lease. We all went together to an area in Paris called 13 District, and this functioned for a while. We had great rents, not too high. But, you know, after a few years, everyone went back to bigger spaces and left. But that was a good way at some point.
I think there's a sense now that phenomenon that you're describing happens at just such an accelerated speed now in a process of gentrification. And I think that a lot of the pressure that is coming from small galleries is actually coming on rent, because it's just actually having the bricks and mortar is so expensive, because once an area begins to gentrify, it just happens at such a pace. Now, Maike, Berlin is a city in which the main topic of conversation, it seems, in most conversations is always has some element of gentrification spoken about in it. How are galleries in Berlin dealing with the fact that, you know, they could get in there cheaply, you know, just a few years ago, but now it's unaffordable to them?
Actually, I don't think that's actually correct, because if you compare, I mean, rents are rising, it's getting harder and harder, you know, but if you compare it to Paris or New York or London, rents are still relatively cheap, and there's around 100 project spaces, artist-run spaces in Berlin that are also in the center of the city. And I also wanted to say something to Almine, actually, that when you ask how the bigger galleries can support this, I think they actually indirectly do. Because if Paris Internationale happens, a lot of their success also comes from the FIAC, from a very successful art fair next door. And also Gallery Weekend is very closely linked to the success of those art fairs, because all of my galleries, and I mean, Gallery Weekend includes also the major Berlin galleries, like Neue Griemschneider, as the Schipper, Sprüt, Magers, and those kinds. And they do all the major global international art fairs, and they meet major collectors at the Art Basel fairs, for example, and bring them back to Berlin. So the success of them is very closely linked to us, and my young galleries profit from this.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are right. In Berlin is a very special case
Yes.
because of its peculiar historical situation. There's a lot more space in the city that you can get into quite cheaply. But Guillaume, that's not the case in Paris, is it? What's been your experience of grounding a gallery in a gentrifying neighborhood?
Very interesting, but I started the gallery in Le Marais, just nearby Almine Gallery, and it was, after 4 years, I just realized that it was not sustainable for me to stay in this neighborhood because it was really too much expensive for my business. So I moved to Belleville, which is northeast in Paris, a neighborhood for the emerging galleries and much more like popular, of course, but in a way of gentrification, like very, very fast, because Paris is very small and concentrated, and of course we have a lack of spaces, so of course people move a little bit more around the city, not inside or in the center. So, but yeah, in terms of business and visibility, for me it was much better, because I joined a group of galleries that already exist, and I joined like a team of galleries, and it was, for me it was better in terms of visibility, yeah.
I think it's interesting, we always sort of conceive of gentrification as, you know, sort of like a rising tide floats all boats, and that it's wonderful. But I think there are some cases where the presence of galleries in neighborhoods are actually being resisted by the residents. So think about in Los Angeles at Boyle Heights, where the actual residents of the neighborhood are protesting against the opening of galleries because they think first come the galleries and then the flat whites and then we're priced out. How, as gallerists, are you aware of what it means when you open a gallery in a neighborhood, that it will change its character? How do you think about that, and what actions do you take because of it?
Well, it was very concrete. When I opened the gallery in Belleville, part of the population around told me, but why a gallery again? It's not for us. We don't care to have a gallery. We want like a grocery store, something like, but not a gallery, because it's not at all for the people who live in this neighborhood. But at the end, it was funny, because it was, I had a lot of people, my gallery is like as a window, like a lot of windows open in the street, so people passing by in the street can really see and visit the show. And it was very interesting to see the reaction of the local people living in this neighborhood with
do they come in though? Do they feel welcome?
Sometimes, and some teenager does, and it's very interesting. They maybe don't like, but whatever. Yeah. They have a reaction, and it's good.
Yeah. Maike, I thought it was interesting before that you were saying that, you know, initiatives like Gallery Weekend are helpful to galleries, but they can't replace fairs, can they? Fairs are still really where it's at in terms of in terms of the art market. I was interested when David Sverner was speaking on an interview with Robin Pogreman yesterday, and he said that he, as a large gallerist, would be willing to pay more so that smaller galleries can get a foot up and can get in on the gallery scene. Almine, would you be prepared to pay higher fares if it helps your colleagues at the lower end of the market?
In the big fairs?
To attend the big fairs.
Well, yes, but I think it does exist, because they have sections with new galleries or emerging artist sections, and they are much cheaper, and I think it's great. I think it's very important, because if you see a fair like in Basel, Liste, in the beginning, like years ago, Liste was a new fair, like off fair and quite small. It became an institution. Now people who come, of course, to the major fair Basel, they start, or they at least go and see, because they can discover artists there, you know. Even dealers sometimes from the main fair go to, and Lister became a very important, but they have a financement, they have collectors and company financing it, so it's very important.
Yeah. Maike, you've also run a fair in addition to Gallery Weekend. How much subsidization goes on?
Well, actually, we've discussed this for a few years now with the bigger galleries in our group, how to support younger galleries more. And we always had the idea or the wish to create a fund, and not only the bigger galleries could invest into it, also everyone else who profits from a healthy primary market, and the younger galleries are our future, so it's very important that they keep opening and that they are healthy. So, I mean, it would also be an idea to ask sponsors to pay into it, to ask also auction houses to pay into it, to very aggressively attack the primary market, and this year also Gallery Weekend, to give something back. And so the only difficulty that we haven't solved yet is the algorithm, how to give it back to the galleries. Like, is it the younger galleries? Is it like a fund to open a new gallery? So this is still, we are still discussing this, but there's a big wish of the bigger galleries here in Berlin to do something for the future.
I mean, do you agree with that the health of galleries at all the different tiers of the market are somehow intertwined, that without the smaller galleries, you won't thrive? Or do you think
sorry?
Do you think that the health of galleries at all the different tiers of the market are actually intertwined? Or do you feel that at the size that you are, that you're sort of immune from what's going on?
No, well, you're never immune. Nobody is immune from anything. But I think even though there is help or like sponsors, one has to prove what one can do. And time will say who remains and who doesn't. So it's always the same struggle anyway. But if you can be sponsored a bit at the beginning, it's like startups, you know? Like you have many, but a few years later, you have less. Yeah. Which is normal. That's how it works.
I'd like to talk maybe a bit about how, so the bricks and mortar gallery, it's very difficult to run one, it's expensive. What about the internet as an option? Guillaume, do you sell works on the internet?
Yes, and even on Instagram, which is horrible.
And so how does that work?
It's so immaterial. We don't know the people necessarily, and it's weird, but it's part of the business now, of the market, I would say. Even before a fair, when you do a fair, you send, of course, preview, like everybody does, and of course you sell things before the fair through internet. So, yeah, it's like very important, but it's also why we have maybe less people visiting galleries as well, because internet is very important today, because we communicate a lot with Instagram. I'm the first, maybe I post a lot of images of my shows and booths on Instagram, but maybe it's not the good way to do if you want to have more people visiting you, like really to...
I imagine people, I mean, it must be there, I imagine there's certain types of works that people would buy online, but others that they wouldn't, you know, large, complicated installations. I don't think anyone's going to sort of buy that having seen it on their phone. Do you feel that that is pushing you and artists in a particular direction to make a certain type of art because you can distribute it in that way?
Maybe. I don't know how, but yeah, maybe. But also it's because I sell works which are not like very expensive, I would say. It's, I don't know if like mega galleries manage to sell like a work more than 1 million on Instagram or internet, maybe. But yes, at the level of the small-sized galleries, yeah, it's like easy.
Okay, we're going to take some questions in a moment, but I want to ask a question for everyone on the panel. I think a lot of this discussion has been framed in terms of what does it mean for the market, what does it mean for the galleries, everything else. But what does all of this mean for the artists that the galleries represent? What is the difficulty for a small gallery to ground itself and to get up and running? How does that affect artists? Maike?
Well, I'm a strong believer in the gallery system because they are the ones who build up artists in a very slow way, if necessary, and they help them. So galleries are the ones who build up artist careers long before they are presented in institutions, long before they find patrons. So actually the galleries are the first kind of sponsors or supporters of artists, and they make them visible, and they always find the young artists. So it's extremely important that this system keeps alive for the artists to be able to present themselves.
But it needs to somehow be fairer, doesn't it? Then it needs to be easier for smaller galleries to get into it. Guillaume, how would you respond to that?
Well, I think the artists are also, they feel the pressure of the market, which is faster today, more international. And I know that is also what you said just before your first question was, what are the difficulties? And one of the major difficulties to keep the artists and to grow with the artists. It's something that is not easy to maintain. And sometimes we manage because the artist really wants to stay with you or something, but once it has some opportunities to work with another gallery, maybe bigger, it's not easy.
Almine, are you grateful for the work that smaller galleries do in nurturing the artists who can then go on to be represented by galleries like your own? Are you grateful of the work that they do, or do you think that
the artists
that the galleries do in nurturing them, or do you think that good artists just stand on their own 2 feet and you can recognize them immediately?
Yeah, well, there are some unknown parts. When you meet an artist, you go to the studio, you love it, you make him a proposal, he says yes, and you start. But in the history, even if nowadays it's maybe a bit different with the art market, maybe bigger, wider, an artist that will remain needs to have a lot of qualities, including, of course, his talent and his creativity and renewing his inspiration, but also other ones, like strategy with his gallery, his own strategy, the way he sees money, all those qualities are important, and he has to have a very well organized mind to resist too many things or to go into them, many choices to do. I mean, an artist that remains is not anybody. It's a very intelligent person with many, many facets in his head. So that's the main thing.
We have time for a couple of questions from the floor. This lady here at the front.
I would like to ask Guillaume if he works with contracts in case of big galleries working with your artist, and if you believe that the 50% has to be reviewed for the medium-sized galleries.
Yeah, it would make sense in a way, especially for an art fair. Because we spend a lot of money when we do an art fair. We pay for the booth, we pay for the shipping, we pay for production, and it's like almost impossible to have the money back, even if we sell well with the 50-50 percentage. So maybe yes, in this context, it could be like something that we discuss. But it's once again, I think it's like case by case, like each artist, or it depends on how much, of course, you sell the works for, and yeah.
Are there any more questions? This lady over here.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't. I don't like most of the galleries, I think. Actually,
sorry, someone is on their way with the microphone.
Hi. Okay. My name is, I am a gallerist. My name is Sundaram Tagore. I know there's a new model that's appearing, emerging between a gallery and an art fair, and that's beginning in London. What do you think of that Cromwell place where you don't occupy a space for 12 months, but for perhaps 2 months? And it's a rotating membership. And I think the gentleman who's creating it is John Martin. What's your reaction to something like that?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been contacted by the Cromwell because I have a lot of artists based in London or from London, so they thought it could make sense for me to have a visibility, not having a space. But I saw the reality of what it costs. It's, I mean, not for me now. It's too much. I think it's like, it could be interesting, of course, but I know that I can't afford. But the idea is very interesting, and why not to develop like a temporary place or having like a pop-up show or just a viewing room during an art fair, or just a viewing room for a one-day shot, or yeah, it's interesting. And I saw, the place is amazing.
I think we have time for just that one last question.
So yesterday we discussed briefly that quite interesting idea for larger galleries to sponsor gallery participations of smaller galleries. And after the talk, I spoke with another person who actually had an even better idea that I wanted to share with you now. Just as we have the artist resale right, shouldn't there be maybe something like an original gallery resale right, so that if a certain artist goes from a smaller gallery to a larger gallery, the smaller gallery who really built the early stages of the career of this artist continues to receive money on sales made?
Almine, how would you respond to that?
So I did not get exactly what the organization would be. So
the idea that when larger galleries take on artists from smaller galleries, that there would be some sort of transfer fees involved, or ongoing as the artist rises in prestige and creates fetches higher prices, that they would continue to go to the smaller gallery.
That still is the contract issue. If there is no contract, nobody will try to give money to someone else, because it's business as every other business. But in principle, I think it's fine. I mean, but in a way, it all depends on the artist. On the artist. He has to be fair with his previous smaller gallery if he feels he should. And then the bigger gallery will follow. Well, I would follow with absolutely no problem. And I did it before. But sometimes the artists themselves, they are super tough. And they say, oh, now I work with her or him, and I no longer work with you. And this is very hard, I'm sure. But it depends a lot on the artist also.
I'm afraid that's all that we've got time for, but thank you very much.